my biggest fear right now for Israel is the Iran nuclear threat. But my biggest fear for America right now is the open border crisis and the real and rising risk of terrorists flooding in with the millions of others to pull off something far worse inside the United States than 9/11.
It seems to me that there is an existential threat on two fronts with Israel right now. So you're my Israel expert. At least I think of you that way. Can you talk about Iran getting the bomb, the imminence of Iran getting the bomb, which they have said 10 million times that they want to use to obliterate Israel? Where does that stand right now? Because that is as existential a threat as one can have on this planet.
Eric, I appreciate you bringing it up. That is, of course, a topic that I've covered both in nonfiction books, Enemies and Allies, which you and I talked about, and in some of my novels. And of course, I'm writing about it for All Israel News and on TBN on the Rosenberg Report. But you're right. What the Iranian regime wants is to actually pull off a second Holocaust. Okay, the first was not good enough for them. Killing 6 million Jews over 6 years or so during the years of the Nazi regime, that's not enough for the Iranian regime. But they want to be able to kill 6.5 million Jews in just a few milliseconds by firing missiles capable of having thermonuclear warheads at us. We're at about 6.5, almost 7 million Jews here in Israel now, and so just a few missiles would destroy all of us. And the flight time from Iran is less than 2 minutes. So that's how urgent this is. And they are within 5 days to 2 weeks of having enough enriched uranium to start building those bombs. They already have the missiles. The gap, and the thing we don't know, the X factor, Eric, is how long would it take them to know how to attach a nuclear warhead to a missile? Because
I would assume that they would already know that. I can't imagine that they don't know that.
Well, the U.S. and Israeli intelligence differ with each other, but also are unified in the sense that they don't think at the moment Iran knows how to do it. Could they drop the bomb out of a plane? Yes, but we'd probably see the plane and shoot it down. Could they bring it in by a boat? Yes. But the actual idea of firing a missile and having the detonation happen at the exact moment is only a few countries have been able to do it in all of history. But that doesn't give us a lot of comfort over here. So
you don't think that they're getting help from Russia or from China in pulling that off?
Ostensibly, the Russians and the Chinese, who are nuclear armed powers themselves, don't want Iran to actually be a nuclear armed country. They say North Korea, and as I've written about both in nonfiction and in fiction, actually have built their own nuclear weapons. We believe they do know how to do this. And so the question is that I've always raised is, how much is Iran doing to buy either fully operational nuclear warheads or the data that North Korea has developed? Then they would, but
you're acting as though they could do something with North Korea without the approval of China. If they're going to do that, China would be approving. They would just not be approving publicly.
Well, that's right. And so the question is, would China approve that? And so far, the intelligence assessment is no. But I wrote a novel a few years ago called The Persian Gamble. This was the premise, that the Iranians take the $150 billion that Obama and Biden gave them for that farcical nuclear deal, and they go secretly try to buy a half dozen fully operational nuclear warheads and the data and get them back here to or get them back to Iran. And I actually talked about that with President Trump in the Oval Office, because I brought him a copy, and he you're like, Joel, that would be very scary. And I said, it would, Mr. President. And he goes, how do you know that the Iranian regime isn't trying to do that right now? And I said, well, Mr. President, I'm hoping that you and Vice President Pence on my one side and Secretary Pompeo, John Bolton at that time, National Security Advisor, are doing everything you can every day to make sure the Persian gamble never comes true. And he laughed and he said, well, we are. But this is fiction at the moment. But how close how close are we? I don't know that question. And that makes people here in Israel and throughout the Middle East, the Arab world too, very, very worried.
Well, look, it seems to me that Israel is not the kind of country to sit around and see what happens. That if they felt any of this were imminent, they would do what's necessary to protect themselves. They would preemptively strike those locations in Iran before Iran is able to pull this off. That alone ought to scare the world, because we know that, as much as I would approve of them doing that, it might draw us into World War III.
Well, that's right, and this is why it really should be the Biden administration that would take out those facilities, because Iran's not going to actually start a full-blown war with the world's only superpower, and the United States has all the capabilities. But Biden has zero interest. He is withdrawing interest, money, troops, missile defense systems from the Middle East. And that is making it more likely in the next 2 years that Israel would have to go it alone, because we don't feel that the Biden administration, the president himself, is going to take decisive action. And that's leaving us very much alone.
So let's connect the dots of how many evangelical Christian leaders in America who said, don't vote for Donald Trump, vote for Joe Biden, or don't vote. I believe many of them really and truly don't care whether Israel is blown off the face of the map, because I don't see how else you can conclude that it would be okay to vote for somebody like Biden. This is as serious as it gets, and I am almost daily astonished by so-called self-appointed evangelical leaders, whether it's Russell Moore or David French, or less vocally people like Rick Warren, who seem to be fine with the Biden administration, with the possibility of any administration, as long as it's Donald Trump. And they have to know that the Biden administration, at least they have to know now, after a couple of years of Biden, that Biden is not going to stick his neck out for anybody, and that if he is in fact being controlled by Obama people, he really doesn't, he just doesn't have the will to do anything like protect Israel. Because I'm sorry to say, I get the impression that there are a lot of people who are leading the Democratic Party today who are anti-Israel. They're not just agnostic on the subject, they're anti-Israel.
Well, I think you just packed in a lot into that, but I don't disagree with anything. I would say there's a lot of moral confusion in American evangelical thinking right now. And I say that with sadness, because I understood. Look, because we've talked about it, and I've talked about it with the president. I was a never Trumper until 4 days before the 2016 election. And in the end, my wife was like, listen, do you believe that Hillary Clinton will keep all of her promises? I said, yeah, that's why I'm terrified of her. Well, do you believe that Donald Trump will keep his conservative promises? I said, I'm not sure, because I don't trust him. And I think a lot of evangelicals who were never Trumpers in 2016 have been I understand why they were, because I had troubles.
So do I.
I know.
Absolutely.
But what is not useful is to be unable or unwilling to adjust when somebody does something right, or a lot of things right. If you're just going to stay in the heck no, we won't go mode, compared to someone who's going to be abortion on demand, doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman, and has thrown the border, the U.S.-Mexican border, open to 5.7 million people. It's literally an invasion. Drug runners, drug cartels, human traffickers, organized crime. This is what we want instead. Look, I got problems with the tweets. I got problem with some of these court cases. I got some of the. So I'm not happy with everything Donald Trump is or stands for. But that doesn't mean that his list of deliverables to evangelicals was better than any other person, including presidents who are evangelicals. Right? And that leads me to this. My biggest fear right now for Israel is the Iran nuclear threat. But my biggest fear for America right now is the open border crisis and the real and rising risk of terrorists flooding in with the millions of others to pull off something far worse inside the United States than 9/11. And that's actually the premise of the Libyan diversion, which was given to me by my friend, former CIA Director, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, when he said, Joel, I asked him, what worries you? What I'm asking you about Russia, China, Iran, all these issues. But Mr. Secretary, this was 2 years ago, what worries you that I'm failing to ask you? And he said, the border, the ungoverned spaces where the Mexican government has just given up on stopping the drug runners, the drug cartels, the human traffickers. Isn't Biden and his team against human trafficking? Doesn't he want to protect little girls and vulnerable women and boys and men? Doesn't he believe in stopping terrorists? This is rising, Eric, to an impeachable offense. The Constitution in Article 4, Section 4, specifically and explicitly states that the president and the federal government, one of their roles in the Constitution is to protect the states and the American people from an invasion.
I just can't believe you're saying it's rising to an impeachable offense.
Are you going to stop the invasion?
It has been an impeachable offense. They have from the beginning made it clear. Listen, this is ugly, ugly stuff. When you recognize that there are people like Joe Biden and his administration who genuinely do not care about girls getting raped, they simply don't. Their actions prove that they don't care, that they have bigger fish to fry, and if there's collateral damage, if the cartels get in, if Chinese forces invade, which many people on the border have said is already happening, it seems obvious that the Biden administration is about as anti-American, forget anti-evangelical, as anti-American as anything we have ever seen. And we still have evangelical leaders either carrying water for the Biden administration or making it sound like it doesn't matter, we shouldn't be political, let's not vote, it doesn't matter who gets in. It's a level of madness and willful blindness that we've never seen. It's absolutely astonishing. I mean, you talk about having trouble with Trump's tweets. I got trouble with Lincoln. I don't think there's a president that I don't have problems with.
I had no problem.
But if you cannot make, well, I'm just saying, if you cannot make a mature choice and understand I have a choice and God will hold me responsible for whoever gets in if I don't vote or if I don't, that to me is an overwhelming message that's been pushed in many evangelical churches.
Well, I think this is why this moral fog, this moral confusion that's starting to spread through some, certainly not all, evangelical leaders and even in the pews, is part of the apostasy, or it's dangerously close to the apostasy that we're talking about. They wouldn't say Jesus isn't the Savior, but and I realize that public policy and the Bible at times seem different to some. But you're talking about the protection of your country, life, liberty, and what's the role of the government in Romans 13? It's to use the sword to protect the people. And so the Libyan Diversion as a novel is, look, it's my Paul Revere moment. It's my way of, I don't have the ear of President Biden, and I don't have the ear of others, but a novel has a way of saying, look, take 450 pages and imagine the worst case scenario. A president who does not pay attention to the border, radical Islamist terrorists take advantage.
Forgive me again, Joel, for interrupting. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, I want to hear everything about this new book, The Libyan Diversion. Don't go away. Joel, once again, this is your way of communicating things in fiction wonderfully that are unfortunately extremely important to America and to the world. So please continue where you were just going.
Well, I'll step back for 1 second, Eric, just to say, not many conservatives, not many evangelicals have moved into the area of writing New York Times best-selling caliber fiction. And while I'm glad for all the nonfiction work that our team is doing, it's important. Fiction has a way of capturing people's imagination and engaging their emotion as well as their intellect in a way that an op-ed or speech can't always do. For example, and engage somebody who totally disagrees with you. For example, I wrote a series of novels a few years ago about ISIS capturing chemical weapons in Syria and plotting a series of genocidal attacks, of course against Israel, of course against the United States, but also against Jordan because they hated the moderate king of Jordan. And because I'm a moron, Eric, I made the king of Jordan, King Abdullah II, the actual king in the novels. Like, I didn't fictionalize him. That's his name. That's how he looks. That's how he acts. That's what and I wrote this trilogy. Well, it happens that the king read the second one in the series after his palace has been destroyed. ISIS is overrunning his country. And not only did he read that one, then he invited me and my wife to spend 5 days with him. Now, this guy is a direct descendant of the founder of Islam, right? The Prophet Muhammad invites me, a Jew who believes in Jesus, a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, to come to spend 5 days with him and his team. And he's read now 3, at least, that I know of, 3 of my novels. Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, Mike Pompeo. It's not just everyday normal people. Sometimes they're world leaders, CIA directors. And that's interesting because it tells me that I'm able to capture someone's interest and hold them, even if they know way more than I do about the topic. So with the Libyan Diversion, what's happening is that this is a character, Marcus Riker, who's a former Marine. He joined the Marines because of 9/11. He saw 9/11. He went to the recruiting office. He signed up. He went to Afghanistan for multiple tours, decorated in combat. Iraq as well, works for the U.S. Secret Service. Now he works for the CIA, and he's tasked with hunting down the worst terrorist on the planet, Abu Nakba, Arabic for the father of catastrophe. Long story short, just to go back to our previous point, he's hunting Abu Nakba, but Abu Nakba knows it and is trying to divert the attention of the United States, the attention of Marcus Riker. Why? To get the U.S. focused on other things so that he can infiltrate the United States via Mexico, this unguarded, unsecured border, with terrorists and radioactive nuclear dirty bombs to bring about a mass casualty attack far worse than anything that was imagined even on 9/11. Now, right now it's fiction, but given what the complete dereliction of duty by President Biden on that border, it will be unpardonable. No American will forgive a president or a party that allows this to happen if it happens in real life. But I don't want to impeach him later. He either has to change course or he needs to be removed now before this catastrophe comes. And that's where fiction and fact, sort of collide in my heart. And that's why I appreciate you having me on the show just to talk about this is work. If it was just entertainment, wonderful. You're watching Mission Impossible, right. You're watching, I don't know, some Netflix show. But this thing could happen, and I don't want to be prescient.
Well,
okay?
It's one of the reasons some people write books. I didn't have that intention when I wrote my Bonhoeffer book, which everybody says reads like a novel, which I guess is why more people have read it. But
and that long, it better be readable. Well, and it was. I loved it. I read it twice.
Well, thank you. Now, if you read it 3 times, you really should buy a fresh copy. I want to be clear about that.
Okay.
But seriously, the fact is that when you read these things, you're kind of responsible for the information. So when I say when people read my Bonhoeffer book, many of them wake up to this seems like it's happening in America today that the church is asleep and that their voice is trying to wake up the church, and the church says, it's not my business. I want to stay in my theological lane, which relates to your book, The Libyan Diversion. These threats are as real as threats can be, but there are still many who call themselves evangelicals who are so blind. I think that really they are so emotionally invested in a certain narrative that they have made themselves blind to what is happening. The idea, I mean, it's one thing for a David French or a Russell Moore to, a few years ago, tremendously naively say that I think Biden is going to govern in a moderate way and he's going to bring more sensibility. I mean, it was preposterous then. But now, right, with 2.5 years under our belt, to see that nightmare and then to still see these elements in the evangelical church refuse to see what people like Mike Pompeo and you and anybody with eyes to see sees, that to me is what's so frightening, that there are some people who are not governed by reason, but are just have an animus, I guess, against Donald Trump, who don't seem to understand that we are really facing these things, and they're going to be responsible. You can't tell us how the Libyan diversion ends, but in the 30 seconds we have left, tell us what you can about this book.
People should buy it. They should read it, and then they should pray on every page, Lord Jesus, please let this never happen. This is why the primaries are important, because Trump has a great record, but okay, he's going to have to prove it that he's the right guy the next time. There's some good people running. Wonderful. That's democracy. And then, I was just talking to a senior Democrat recently who's shocked that Biden is going to be the nominee, because one medical event. I'll leave you with this. In the book, the current president has a massive stroke, and they have to invoke the 25th Amendment.
Hang on a second. This is too good. I'm going to interrupt you again. We've got a couple of minutes left with our friend Joel Rosenberg. Don't go away.
And I actually haven't said this on any of the other interviews, because I don't think anyone else is that interested. I'm so focused on the border issue, and that's what people want to talk about, and I appreciate that. But there's another element in the Libyan diversion, and that is my fictional American president has a massive stroke in the book. And the 25th Amendment to remove a president because he or she is not capable has never been invoked in American history. I mean, it only came up in the 60s, but still, it's never happened. We've never used it. There was talk, as you'll recall, right at the end of the Trump administration by Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, but they weren't talking about Trump. He was on the way out. They were talking about Joe Biden. They were worried about him, but then they watched Kamala Harris in action, and she became an insurance policy for Biden. No one's going to remove him because they're worried that somebody worse and less competent would take over. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details in my novel, but I've never read a novel where where a president actually had a stroke and they had to go through the 25th Amendment process. And this creates chaos and it distracts from the business of the country. But the Democrats right now are putting up a man who I don't want to be mean. I'm still an evangelical. But I have to say, I'm worried for Joe Biden. Yes, I'm worried for the country, the U.S. and Israel and our Arab allies, all of our allies. But I think it's cruel with the challenges he's having. But it's also, it could be good for the Republican Party, but it's bad for America to put somebody who's doing so badly, who has real cognitive issues, not every moment, not every day, not the way you could slander him, but enough to say 4 more years, that is not a good setup. And then who do we get, if he wins, who comes next? And so I wasn't really trying to focus on Biden per se. He's not a Biden-esque character, except that he's terrible on the border. But he's actually a Republican in the book. But it worries me that America looks very much on the down, the decline. And when an imperfect leader comes in and starts to take us in the right direction, that's a good thing. when an imperfect person comes in and takes us in the wrong direction, that's a dangerous thing. And that's where we are right now.